Listen closely, because this is the truth they don't want you to know. The pain they caused you will not go unanswered. They may think they've escaped, that they've moved on without consequences, but what they don't realize is that justice is already coming for them. No one betrays, manipulates, or wounds another without facing the weight of their own actions. Stay with me, because in the next few moments you'll understand why those who hurt you will soon experience the very suffering they once ignored. There is a weight that settles deep within the soul when you have been wronged by someone close to you. It is not just the pain of the betrayal itself, but the haunting question that lingers in your mind long after the damage has been done. Will they ever understand what they put me through? Will they ever feel this same pain, or will they continue on untouched, as if my suffering never mattered? It is an ache that refuses to fade, a wound that does not simply heal with time. Because this is not just any kind of hurt. It is the kind that comes from those you trusted, from the ones you believed in, from the very people you thought would stand by you, not turn against you. The weight of such pain is not just emotional, it is spiritual. It shakes your foundation. It makes you question everything. Your faith in people, your belief in justice, your trust in the very fabric of right and wrong. At first, you might try to rationalize it. Maybe they didn't mean to hurt me. Maybe they don't realize what they have done. Maybe I'm just overthinking it. But deep down, you know the truth. They saw your pain, and they did nothing. They heard your cries, and they remained silent. They witnessed your struggle, and instead of lifting you up, they walked away. Or worse, they contributed to your suffering. And now, as you sit with this hurt, this betrayal, this deep sense of injustice, you begin to wonder, where is the justice in this? Do they simply move on while I carry the burden of what they did? Will they ever have to answer for their actions? You are not alone in this question. It is one that has been asked for centuries, whispered in prayers, cried out in silence, written in the hearts of the broken. But there is an answer, one that is not based on human perception, not dependent on whether or not you see it unfold with your own eyes, but one that is absolute, one that is written in the very law of existence itself. He will repay them for their sins and destroy them for their wickedness. The Lord our God will destroy them. Psalm 94:23. This is not just a verse, it is a divine promise, a declaration from the highest authority. It is the assurance that no wrong goes unnoticed, no pain goes unanswered, and no betrayal is without consequence. It is the unshakable truth that what was done to you will not go unpunished. At this moment, you may not see it. You may look at them and wonder how they continue living their lives as if nothing happened, as if they have escaped the weight of their actions. You may watch them smile, succeed, thrive even, and wonder where God's justice is. But you must understand, God's justice does not operate on human timelines. It does not conform to what we think is fair or how quickly we want to see things happen. But it happens. Just as the seed buried in the ground does not sprout immediately, just as the harvest does not appear the moment the seed is sown, the consequences of one's actions unfold in God's perfect timing. And when that time comes, the same pain they once dismissed, the same suffering they ignored, the same betrayal they inflicted, it will all return to them, not by your hand, not through your anger, but by the hand of the Almighty Himself. Because you see, there is a common mistake that people make. They believe that silence means escape, that just because justice is not immediate, it will never come, that just because they have not yet suffered the consequences of their actions, they never will. But what they fail to understand is that God is never blind and He is never late. He is watching. He has been watching. He saw the moment you were hurt. He He heard the words spoken against you. He witnessed the betrayal, the abandonment, the deception. He saw the nights you cried yourself to sleep, the days you walked with a heavy heart, the moments when you felt like no one cared. And he has already decreed the outcome. They will come to know what it feels like. They will face the same pain they once inflicted upon you. It may come in a different form, through different circumstances, but it will come. Not as an accident, not as coincidence, but as the fulfillment of God's word. Because when the Lord speaks, his word does not return void. So you do not need to seek revenge. You do not need to waste your energy hoping they will suffer. You do not need to spend your days watching and waiting, wondering when justice will come. Justice has already been set in motion. There will come a time when they too will cry out, when they too will feel abandoned, betrayed, hurt in a way they never expected. And in that moment, when they finally understand the weight of their actions, when they experience the same pain they once caused, they will remember you. They will remember what they did. They will remember the suffering they once dismissed. And they will know, this is not chance, this is not bad luck. This is divine justice. This is the fulfillment of what has already been written. He will repay them for their sins and destroy them for their wickedness. The Lord our God will destroy them. And when that day comes, you will not need to say a word, because the very people who once took your pain lightly will now understand it fully. Not because you wished it upon them, not because you made it happen, but because it was always meant to be. Trust is a sacred thing, a bond woven between souls, held together by the unseen threads of loyalty, integrity, and faithfulness. It is the foundation upon which relationships are built, whether it be between friends, family, or even those we love the most. And yet, when that trust is shattered, when someone close to you, someone you once believed in, turns against you, the pain is unlike any other. It is a wound that cuts to the deepest part of your being, leaving behind scars that may never fully heal. Perhaps you gave them your loyalty, your faith, your unwavering support, only for them to cast it aside like it meant nothing. You stood by them when the world was against them, yet when you needed them, they vanished. Or worse, they became the very ones who caused your suffering. They whispered words of betrayal behind your back. They abandoned you in your moment of need. They made you believe in their sincerity, only to use you for their own gain. And now you sit in the ruins of what once was, asking yourself, will they ever feel this pain? Will they ever understand what they have done? Will they go through the same agony that they so carelessly inflicted upon you? He'll repay them for their sins and destroy them for their wickedness. The Lord our God will destroy them. Psalm 94:23. Let those words sink into your heart. This is not a possibility. This is not a question of if. It is a certainty. God himself has declared that those who betray, those who sin against the innocent, will face the consequences. You may not see it today. You may not see it tomorrow, but understand this. Their betrayal has already set into motion a judgment that they cannot escape. They have sown the seeds of treachery, and the harvest of their own undoing is already growing beneath their feet. History, both biblical and modern, is filled with this undeniable truth. Jacob deceived his father and stole the blessing from Esau, and years later he found himself deceived by his own uncle Laban, who tricked him into years of servitude. Judas betrayed Jesus for 30 pieces of silver, thinking he had gained something, yet in the end the same silver that seemed to enrich him became the very weight that led him to destruction. God does not let betrayal go unanswered. He will repay them for their sins. Not you, not the world. God himself will ensure that they taste the very bitterness they once served to you. Perhaps they walk freely now. Perhaps they laugh, thinking they have escaped the consequences of their actions. But the unseen hand of divine justice is already at work. What they did to you, they will face themselves. The same trust they betrayed in you will be betrayed in them. The same way they abandoned you, they will find themselves abandoned when they least expect it. You don't need to wish for it. You don't need to seek it. You don't need to spend your life hoping for their downfall. The Holy Book has spoken, and when God speaks, His word must be fulfilled. They may think they have moved on, that they have won. But watch. One day they will look into the face of someone they trusted, someone they believed in, and in that moment they will experience the same pain they once gave you, and they will remember. They will remember what they did. They will remember how they treated you, and they will know with absolute certainty that this is the justice of God. There is no pain quite like the pain of being abandoned by someone you counted on. When you were at your lowest, when life was breaking you piece by piece, you turned to them, the ones who promised they would always be there. You reached out with trembling hands, hoping they would hold you up, but instead you found nothing but emptiness. They walked away when you needed them the most. Perhaps they were there when times were good, when there was something to gain, when your presence benefited them. But when the storms came, when your world fell apart, they vanished. They turned their back on you in the moment you were most vulnerable. Maybe you begged for help. Maybe you cried out in desperation, only to be met with silence. And the worst part? They never looked back. You sat there broken, wondering how someone who once stood so close could walk away so easily. You asked yourself, do they not feel the weight of what they've done? Do they not see the pain they caused? Will they ever know what it feels like to be abandoned in their darkest hour? The answer has already been written in the Holy Book. He will repay them for their sins and destroy them for their wickedness. The Lord our God will destroy them. Psalm 94:23. Understand this: God is not blind to betrayal. He sees the suffering of those who have been left behind. He hears the cries of those who were forsaken. And He has already decreed that those who abandon others in their time of need will themselves be abandoned. It is a divine law, unbreakable and absolute. The same way they turned away from you, someone will turn away from them. The same silence they left you in, they will find themselves drowning in. When they call out for help, when they need a hand to hold, they will be met with the same emptiness they once gave you. We have seen this truth unfold time and time again. Look at Peter. On the night of Jesus' greatest suffering, Peter, who once swore to stand by Him no matter what, denied Him 3 times. And yet, after Jesus was gone, Peter found himself broken, weeping in regret, isolated in his own sorrow. The pain he had caused was the pain he later carried. Look at the parable of the prodigal son. He left his father's house, took everything he could, and lived selfishly. But when the famine came, when he had nothing left, he turned to the same kind of people he once surrounded himself with, only to find that they abandoned him the moment he needed them. The very abandonment he inflicted on his father became his own reality. God ensures that those who forsake others will one day understand what it feels like to be forsaken. It may not come immediately. It may seem like they are thriving, like they are unaffected by what they have done. But rest assured, their time will come. There will be a day when they need someone and no one will answer. There will be a day when they cry out, only to find themselves utterly alone. Not because of coincidence, not because of bad luck, but because of divine justice. God does not forget. They will come to know what it is like to feel helpless, to feel abandoned, to feel the sting of being left behind. And in that moment, they will remember. They will remember the day they left you to struggle on your own. They will remember the moment they chose to walk away when you needed them the most. And just as you once sat in silence, wondering if they would ever feel the pain they inflicted, they will sit in that same silence, knowing that the very thing they did to you has now happened to them. Words carry power. They can build up or tear down, heal or destroy. When someone close to you uses their words as a weapon, the wounds they leave are not visible, yet they cut deeper than any blade. The sting of betrayal, the humiliation of insults, the weight of cruel accusations, these are the scars left behind by a tongue that was meant to speak kindness, but instead chose to cause harm. Maybe they mocked your pain. Maybe they spread lies about you, twisting the truth to serve their own interests. Maybe they spoke with poison-laced words, not just in anger, but with the deliberate intent to break you. They used what you confided in them as ammunition against you. They humiliated you in front of others, spoke words that made you question your worth, or turned people against you with their deceit. You might have wondered, will they ever know what it feels like? Will they ever experience the pain of having words used against them? Will they ever be silenced by the very voices they once controlled? The very words they used to harm you will turn against them. The lies they spoke will one day be exposed, and the humiliation they caused will come back upon their own head. This is not human revenge. This is divine law. The weight of their own words will become their downfall. It happens time and time again. Haman in the book of Esther is a perfect example. He spoke with arrogance, seeking to destroy Mordecai, spreading slander to bring him down. He manipulated the king with his words, convincing him to carry out an evil plan. Yet in the end, his own words led to his demise. The very gallows he built for Mordecai became his own execution site. The scheme he crafted, the narrative he spun, it all unraveled and he became a victim of his own deceit. The Pharisees and religious leaders who sought to trap Jesus in his words thought they were wise, using clever speech and twisted accusations to discredit him. But what happened? Their own words turned against them. The very thing they tried to use as a weapon became the evidence of their hypocrisy. The justice they thought they controlled slipped from their hands, and they stood exposed before the truth. God's justice is poetic. The same mouth that cursed you will one day cry out in regret. The same people who used words to hurt you will hear their own name spoken in ways they never imagined. The rumors they spread will circle back to them. The manipulation they used will no longer work. Perhaps they feel untouchable now. Perhaps they think their words have vanished into the wind, forgotten by time. But what they don't realize is that words never disappear. They echo, they multiply, and in the end, they return to their source. When that day comes, when they taste the bitterness of their own speech, they will remember. They will recall the words they spoke over you, the harm they caused, the way they twisted the truth. And as they sit in the wreckage of their own making, they will understand. What they gave to you has come back upon them. There is a kind of cruelty that is not loud, not violent, but just as destructive. It is the cruelty of being used, of having your kindness taken for granted, of being treated not as a person, but as a convenience. Some people, especially those closest to you, see your goodness not as something to be cherished, but as something to exploit. You gave them your time, your energy, your love, without hesitation, without expecting anything in return. You were there for them when they needed help, when they had nowhere else to turn. You supported them in ways they never even acknowledged, and yet, when they had what they wanted, when they no longer needed you, they discarded you as if you never mattered. They knew your heart, and instead of appreciating it, they used it against you. They made you feel guilty for saying no. They manipulated you into always being there for them, but when you needed even a fraction of that kindness in return, they suddenly disappeared. It wasn't that they didn't have the ability to give back. It was that they never intended to. You might have asked yourself, will they ever know what it feels like? Will they ever experience the pain of being used and discarded? Will they ever feel the emptiness of realizing that they were only valued for what they could give and never for who they truly are? The justice of God is not blind to your pain. Those who used you will one day be used themselves. Those who saw you only as a tool will one day find themselves treated the same way. The people they thought would always serve them will abandon them when they need it most. They will be discarded, not because of bad luck or misfortune, but because God is repaying them for what they have done. Look at the story of Jacob and Laban. Jacob served Laban faithfully for years, working hard and expecting fairness. But Laban was not an honest man. He used Jacob's labor, changed his wages, and took advantage of his dedication. Yet in the end, what happened? Laban, who had spent years using others, was himself left with nothing. He tried to keep Jacob under his control, but God intervened, and Jacob was the one who prospered, while Laban faded into obscurity. Or take the story of Samson and Delilah. Samson loved Delilah, trusted her, and gave her his heart, but Delilah saw him only as a means to an end. She used his love to betray him, taking advantage of his devotion. But what became of Delilah? The very people she helped soon discarded her. She was never truly valued, only used for what she could provide, and once she had served her purpose, she was left to face the consequences alone. This is how it always happens. Those who take advantage of others eventually find themselves in the same position. It may not happen immediately. It may seem like they continue to get away with it, but God is patient, and His justice never fails. The same way they drained you, someone will drain them. The same way they discarded you, they will be cast aside. And when that moment comes, when they finally understand what it feels like, they will remember. They will remember the way they treated you. They will remember how they made you feel small, how they never thought twice about taking from you without giving anything in return, and in that moment they will realize what they once did so easily to you has now become their own reality. Manipulation is one of the most insidious forms of betrayal. It is not always loud, not always obvious, but it is always destructive. When someone close to you manipulates you, they do not attack you openly. Instead, they twist reality, making you question yourself, your worth, and even your own sanity. They make you feel guilty for things you should never feel guilty for. They use their words, their actions, and even their silence to control you. Maybe they played the victim when they were the ones hurting you. Maybe they made you believe that you were always the one in the wrong, even when your heart told you otherwise. They twisted the truth, bent your emotions, and left you feeling like you owed them something when, in reality, they were the ones taking from you. At first, you may not have even noticed it. That is the danger of manipulation. It works slowly, subtly, until one day you wake up and realize that you are no longer yourself. You were once confident, once sure of your own heart, but now you hesitate before every decision, second-guess every thought, and wonder if you are the problem. And when they had taken everything they could from you, your trust, your self-respect, your ability to see things clearly, they walked away as if they had done nothing wrong. They convinced themselves they had won. They believed they had outsmarted you, that they had gotten what they wanted without ever having to face the consequences. But what they do not realize is that manipulators eventually become the manipulated. The very deception they used on you will one day be used against them. They will meet someone who plays their own game better than they ever could. They will fall into a web they cannot escape, just as they once trapped you. Look at Jacob and Esau. Jacob deceived his father Isaac to take Esau's blessing, believing he had gained something through manipulation. But what happened? When he went to Laban's house, he found himself deceived, tricked into years of labor, forced to experience the very same manipulation he had once used. Look at King Saul. He manipulated his kingdom, his servants, and even David. He thought he could twist events in his favor, that he could control the outcome of everything, but in the end, he was the one deceived. His own paranoia led him to destruction. He thought he was controlling others, but he was being led into ruin by his own schemes. The manipulators of the world believe they are untouchable. They think they are always a step ahead, always in control. But what they fail to understand is that deception is a double-edged sword. The same way they played you, someone will play them. The same way they twisted your reality, their own reality will be twisted beyond recognition. And when that moment comes, when they finally realize they are no longer in control, they will remember. They will remember how they made you doubt yourself, how they made you feel small and powerless. And in that moment, as they struggle to understand how they ended up in the very position they once put you in, they will come to see what they thought they had mastered has now mastered them. There are people in this world who find satisfaction in the suffering of others. They may not always show it openly, but in their hearts, they feel a sense of triumph when they see someone struggling. It is a quiet kind of cruelty, one that does not require physical harm or direct attacks. Instead, it is a form of wickedness that thrives in silence, in indifference, in the small, unnoticed moments when they secretly enjoy another person's downfall. Maybe you have felt this in your own life. Perhaps you have gone through hardships, moments of deep sorrow, or times when you needed support, only to realize that certain people were watching you suffer with no intention of helping. Worse still, some of them may have even contributed to your pain, whether through their words, actions, or deliberate absence. When you were broken, they did not offer kindness. When you were struggling, they did not extend a hand. And when you fell, instead of lifting you up, they stood back and watched. Sometimes with amusement, sometimes with quiet satisfaction, but always with a heart that felt no remorse for your suffering. At first, you may have wondered if you were imagining it. You may have told yourself that no one could truly take pleasure in the pain of another, that surely they didn't mean to be so indifferent, that maybe they were just too caught up in their own lives to notice your struggle. But then you began to see the pattern. You began to notice how they were always present to witness your hardships, but never around when you succeeded. You began to see how their energy shifted when you were doing well, how they became distant, uninterested, or even resentful. And yet, the moment life became difficult for you, they seemed engaged again, suddenly paying attention, as if your suffering gave them something they craved. It is a painful realization to come to, that there are people who do not want to see you thrive, people who feel a sense of relief when you are struggling because it makes them feel better about their own lives. They may not say it out loud, they may not even admit it to themselves, but deep down, they prefer to see you weak. Because when you are weak, you are no longer a threat. When you are suffering, they feel superior. When you are broken, they feel whole. But what they do not understand is that suffering does not belong to one person alone. Pain is not something that can be passed on to another without eventually returning. The same suffering they delighted in, the same hardships they watched you endure without compassion, those things will come back to them. Not because you wish it upon them, not because you seek revenge, but because life has a way of making people experience the very things they once ignored in others. There will come a day when they find themselves in the same position you were once in. They will face struggles they never anticipated, hardships they never prepared for, and in that moment they will turn to those around them, expecting the same support they once denied you. But instead of finding comfort, they will find cold indifference. Instead of a helping hand, they will be met with the same silence they once gave you. The pain they once watched from a distance will become their own. At first, they may not recognize what is happening. They may believe that it is just misfortune, that life is simply being unfair. But as time goes on, as they begin to experience the same loneliness, the same despair, the same sense of abandonment they once ignored in you, they will remember. They will remember the times they saw you suffering and chose to do nothing. They will remember the way they watched as you struggled, never offering even a word of kindness. And in that moment, they will understand something they never did before, what it truly feels like to be in pain while others look on, uncaring and unmoved. And when that moment comes, they will begin to long for the very thing they once refused to give. They will long for kindness, for understanding, for someone to stand by them in their darkest hour. But they will realize that kindness cannot be demanded, that compassion cannot be forced. It must be freely given, and because they never gave it, they will find that there is no one left to give it to them. It is not that the world is cruel, nor that people are intentionally punishing them. It is simply the way justice unfolds. When you refuse to show mercy, mercy is not shown to you. When you take pleasure in the suffering of others, suffering finds its way to your own doorstep. When you ignore the pain of another, one day you wake up to find that no one is willing to acknowledge your own. They may try to escape it. They may try to convince themselves that what is happening to them is unfair, that they do not deserve it. But deep in their hearts, they will know the truth. They will remember the times they could have been kind and chose not to be. They will recall the moments when they had the chance to lift someone up, but instead stood back and watched. And as they sit in the silence they once imposed on you, as they feel the sting of being ignored, overlooked, and left to struggle alone, they will finally understand the pain they once caused. There will be no one left to blame, no excuses to hide behind, no justifications to ease the weight of what they are going through. The suffering they once found amusing has now become their own. And the only thing left will be the realization that they brought it upon themselves. There are people in this world who believe that kindness is weakness. They look at a good heart and see an opportunity to take advantage. They see generosity not as a virtue, but as a resource to be drained. And so they manipulate, deceive, and exploit the very people who once cared for them the most. You gave without hesitation. Not because you expected anything in return, but because it was in your nature to do so. You helped them when they had nothing. You stood by them when others walked away. You defended them when they couldn't defend themselves. But they did not see your kindness for what it truly was. They saw it as something to use, something to take for granted. At first, you didn't notice it. You assumed they valued your efforts, that they recognized the sacrifices you made for them. You excused their behavior, believing they were just going through a difficult time, that one day they would appreciate all that you had done. But days turned into weeks, weeks into months, and still their attitude never changed. They took and took, never stopping to consider how much they were draining from you. And when you finally had nothing left to give, when you needed something in return, support, kindness, even just the bare minimum of respect, they gave you nothing. They treated you as if you never mattered. They dismissed you as if your presence in their life was insignificant. And then they moved on, searching for their next source. They never looked back. They never thought twice about how much they had taken from you. It didn't bother them that you were left empty, exhausted and hurt. To them, you were just another person to use, another heart to break, another soul to leave behind. And yet, as you sit there wondering how someone could be so cruel, questioning why your kindness was met with nothing but disregard, you must understand this. No one who treats others this way escapes without consequence. Life has a way of restoring balance. What a person puts out into the world always finds its way back to them. They may believe they can continue this cycle forever, that they can keep using and discarding people without ever facing the repercussions, but that belief is an illusion. Because the moment they treat someone as disposable, they plant the seed of their own fate. One day, they will find themselves on the other side. They will meet someone who treats them exactly as they treated you. They will pour their energy into someone only to be used and forgotten. They will give their loyalty to someone only to realize that they are nothing more than an afterthought. At first, they won't recognize what is happening. They will believe that they are in control, that they are the ones benefiting. But slowly, they will start to notice the signs. The same signs you once saw. They will feel the exhaustion of giving and never receiving. They will feel the sting of being dismissed when they need help. They will feel the weight of realizing that they have been used, just as they once used you. And when that moment comes, they will finally understand what they have done. It won't be immediate. It may take years. They may go through life believing that they have escaped the consequences of their actions, that their choices will never come back to haunt them. But what they do not realize is that every action, every decision, every moment of selfishness has already set their fate in motion. The pain they caused, the suffering they ignored, the kindness they exploited, it will all return to them when they least expect it. And when it does, there will be no one there to shield them from it. They will reach out just as you once did, searching for someone to care. But the silence they once gave you will be the only answer they receive. They will ask for help just as you once did, and find only empty hands. They will sit in the same darkness they once left you in, wondering why no one is there for them, why no one sees their struggle, why no one values them the way they expected to be valued. And in that moment, they will remember. They will remember how they treated you. They will remember the way they drained your kindness without ever giving back. They will remember the way they left you with nothing, believing that they would never have to face the same fate. But fate is not something to be outrun. Consequences are not something to be avoided. And the suffering they inflicted will become their own reality. It will not come from anger, nor from revenge. It will come because justice demands balance. What they did to you, they will experience for themselves, and only then will they finally understand the depth of the pain they caused. Nothing in this world goes unseen. No betrayal is forgotten, no cruelty is overlooked, and no injustice escapes the eyes of the Almighty. The people who have hurt you, the ones who have taken your kindness for granted, who manipulated, abandoned, and wounded you, they may believe they have escaped consequence, but they have not. The Holy Book declares, He will repay them for their sins and destroy them for their wickedness. The Lord our God will destroy them. Psalm 94, 22 through 23. This is not a warning. This is a divine promise, a decree from the highest authority that cannot be overturned. The suffering they inflicted will return to them. The tears they caused will not go unanswered, and the pain they thought they could walk away from will one day become their own. You do not have to carry the burden of revenge. You do not have to wait, hoping to see them suffer. It is not your battle to fight, it is God's. He will repay. He will restore. He will bring justice in His perfect time. And when that time comes, when they stand in the ruins of what they once built, when they taste the very suffering they inflicted upon you, they will finally understand, not because you willed it, not because you sought it, but because God is just and His justice never fails. So stand firm in your faith, hold on to the truth, keep your heart pure, for your reward is coming and their judgment is already written. The Lord has spoken, and His word will not return void.